I want to tell you a story about a woman I knew in seminary, but I'm going to change her name to protect the innocent. Or should I say, change her name to protect the odd. Let's call her Karen Little. Karen Little was a person I knew in seminary, but she had been there a long time. I think she had been in seminary for 9 years by the time I was enrolled, and mind you, a seminary degree is generally a 3-year commitment. But Karen was a fixture, and every time she came within a few credits of completing one of the degrees, she would change programs and start over again. That was just what she did. I do not know how she paid for all of this. In fact, there were rumors for a time that she was living in the stacks of the library. And friends, that is not the weirdest thing that happened in seminary. I sat on the professional studies committee. And so I was there when Karen got the bad news. Come May, she would receive a degree and she had to leave. Oh my goodness, you should have seen her. She cried and she pleaded, asking to be allowed to remain in seminary. There were still some courses that she was interested in. There were still some subjects she hadn't mastered yet. She felt that she was not ready to graduate. It was her home in essence, and she didn't want to leave it. But nothing could be done. Nothing could be done. She had earned her degree. And I remember another professor who sat on professional studies with me put his arm around her and he said, Karen, it's okay. You may not feel ready, but you'll be fine. Karen Little was an odd duck indeed. But you know, I recognize the impulse. Not to stay in seminary, good heavens, no. I was ready to go after 3 years, but I get it. I get it. When you finally find a place where everything makes sense and you understand God's role in your life and you have an experience of the holy like she did, it's hard to leave. You don't want to go. These moments of experiencing the presence of God that kind of take your breath away, there's a particular word for these moments. They're called revelations. The great revealing of the moment when you see God's presence active in the world. It's usually because God's activity in your life or in the world around us is veiled and hidden, but there are moments when suddenly we see. And it is a wonderful thing to behold. A revelation is what Peter and James and John experience on that mountaintop that we read about in Matthew's gospel. The revelation that they have is about the true identity of their rabbi, Jesus, the one they have been following and learning from, the one they have been a companion to all these months. And there's a parallel. Did you notice this? There's a parallel between Matthew's gospel and the other reading for the day. We read about Moses climbing up to Mount Sinai and Moses' encounter with God. You notice how they're similar? There's the climb up to a place far away. There is the cloud that is present. There is the voice of God that comes from the cloud. There is the bright light of the holy countenance. We didn't read it in Exodus, but there's a part later when Moses comes down from the mountain after speaking to God, and he is glowing with the presence of the holy so brightly that everyone's afraid to talk to him. You forget this part of the Ten Commandments movie. They didn't show it. He had to wear a veil across his face because he shone with the presence of God. So here we have the parallel between Moses going up the mountain at Mount Sinai and Jesus and the disciples going up the mountain where they encounter God. But there's another parallel, right? If you recall from the story in Matthew's gospel of the baptism of Jesus, the parallel is the same voice that spoke in that moment now speaks in this moment. Recall that story about the baptism of Jesus, where he comes up out of the water and suddenly there is a voice from heaven that says, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." This time, the voice adds a little more. Listen to him. But it's meant to be a parallel. In fact, Matthew's gospel is structured beautifully so that as the story of Jesus unfolds, Matthew keeps reminding the reader, the hearer, that this is the Son of God. It happens at the baptism, at the transfiguration, at the crucifixion, and at the resurrection. Matthew does not want anyone to forget that the rabbi, the one who is in front of them, Jesus, is also the beloved Son, the Messiah. But of course, for Peter and James and John, who were not at the baptism and had never before heard that word, this was a new revelation. And here they are having this vision where they see Jesus transformed and he is glowing white like they know that Moses was glowing white. And they also know that there is the presence of Moses who represents the law and Elijah who represents the prophets and Jesus who says he is the completion of all things. And it's right there in front of them. And they understand it and they see it and it's clear and they know who he is and who they are in relationship to him. And so, of course, Peter starts to just babble like a crazy man. Hey, this is great. Let's stay here. I will build 3 houses for you, for Moses and Elijah, and we'll just live here. I would easily have done the same. But a great cloud comes over them, and the voice comes down and says, this is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And they're struck with fear because they know this is the voice of God, and so the 3 of them drop to the ground, and the next thing they know, Jesus comes and touches them, and it's all back the way it was. There's no Moses, there's no Elijah, there's no cloud, there's no voice. It's just Jesus, and they're supposed to listen to him, and what he says is get up and do not be afraid. Get up and do not be afraid. I wonder if they had a moment where they thought, was that real? Did I see what I thought I saw? Was it clear? And as they go down the mountaintop, and we are told that Jesus says, don't tell anyone about this vision, can you imagine what they were thinking? Wow, is Jesus the Messiah? I think I saw something, but I'm not sure. I wonder if they ever thought about sneaking back to that place, getting back up to the top of the mountain, trying to recreate that experience in order to know for sure again, this is Jesus the Christ. They have to go down now. They can't stay on the mountaintop. They have to go down back into the valley because that's where Jesus is going. And remember what Jesus will now face. Jesus is going down to a fate that he knows. The disciples don't know, but they follow. Jesus knows what is coming, and they're just following him. See, this is the thing with mountaintop experiences. They don't last. We wish they did, but they don't. I've had mountaintop experiences, not like Karen Little. I mean, seminary was great, don't get me wrong. But there have been other great mountaintop experiences. I spoke with Bible study on Wednesday about this, and people named mountaintop experiences. And I've heard of others that people have had, and they're not always necessarily connected to an understanding of the presence of the holy. Sometimes they're just an experience of breathtaking love and a powerful moment of clarity. Some of the mountaintop experiences people name are the birth of a child, the birth of the first grandchild, which I'm told is better than the birth of a child. We'll see. How about the moment when you first realized you were in love with your partner? How about the moment when you had a prayer answered specifically and powerfully? I've had mountaintop experiences in worship when music is playing, when songs are sung. I've known people who have had mountaintop experiences when they've been at church camp, that they've been in God's creation and they have been assured in a moment that yes, God is present in this place. I even have another friend who she had a mountaintop experience on a silent retreat, a week-long silent retreat, which sounds like hell to me. But she says it was a mountaintop. That in that stretch of time where there were no words, she felt the word present to her in a new way. And she felt remade in that moment, holy and whole. She kept going back to silent retreats after that, trying to recapture that experience, and it never was quite the same. It's one of the problems with mountaintop experiences. Try as you might, they will not be made captive. We just have to let them happen. Those mountaintop experiences, those moments that take our breath away, are so gorgeous, so precious, and so powerful. We want to hold on to them. They are the moments that reveal that God is surely present in this world, and most of the time, we don't see it. There isn't a lot of evidence. And so we look back on these mountaintop experiences, hoping to recapture, hoping to get back to the time where it was clear and we knew for sure, and faith was easy. But you can't. You can't go back. You have to go down from those experiences into the valley, because that's where life actually happens. Yes, we have these rare moments which are so glorious, but the day in, day out, that's where we are meant to live and to serve. That's where we have to work out this faith that we've been given in these holy moments. And yes, I get it. I get that we yearn for, we crave this presence of God, and we know that love those moments where it is so clear. But the truth is, God's presence is always with us. And the reason these revelations have so much power is that they are simply revealing for a moment something that is always and constantly true. God's presence is always with us, whether or not we can see it. God's eternal love, God's Holy Spirit moving through our lives, that is always with us. So now, as we think about our lives down in the valley, I want us to listen to what the voice of God says to the disciples, says to us. This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And then the next words that Jesus says to the disciples are, get up, in Greek literally, be raised, and do not be afraid. Be raised and do not be afraid. Those are the words that make my heart pound faster as I think about going down into the valleys of life, of serving in places where the presence of God is not so obvious. Be raised and do not be afraid. That's how faith works, isn't it? That's one of the things that holds the four traditions of this church together. That whether you're Presbyterian or Baptist or UCC or Methodist, we have a faith that we believe that we are meant to cultivate a personal piety, a relationship with God on the one hand in those mountaintop experiences, but then we go out and serve the world. It's a 1-2 step. Our faith is incomplete without these two things. A faith that is put in action, and it's put in action in the valleys. I love mountaintop experiences. I wish I could recreate some that I've had in my life. I'd like to have a little bottle of it and just take a sip every once in a while when I'm feeling a little doubtful. But that's not the way it works. We have to come down from these experiences into the valleys of life and live out our faith, because there are people out there who have not had such wonderful experiences. And we're supposed to show them what it looks like. I do not know what valleys you go into. I do not know what places you serve, what people you encounter, or what God calls you to do. I don't know. But I know it's a valley. And I know we must go there. And I know that God's presence is always with us. So as you leave this place of wonder and beauty and clarity, carry with you the words of Jesus, the one we are supposed to listen to. Be raised and do not be afraid. Amen.